So this is published just a few days ago, Alec McGillis in ProPublica, and it comes under the title, The Lost Year, What the Pandemic Cost Teenagers, with the subtitle, In Hobbs, New Mexico, the high school closed and football was canceled, while just across the state line in Texas, students seem to be living nearly normal lives. Here's how pandemic school closures exact their emotional toll on young people. So Zach, if I may, for a moment, I'll read one section from my screen, and then I'll have you give it back in a minute, Zach. So, and the quote, and the psychological stress that the pandemic has produced for so many Americans of all ages is unlike so many more acute crises that we might experience in life, said Nick Allen, a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Oregon. Quote, this is quoting Nick Allen. There's a difference between a stressor that makes your life unpleasant and intolerable and a stressor that takes away good things, he said. For a lot of people, the stressor that COVID represents is one that takes away good things. You can't go to sporting events, you can't see your friends, you can't go to parties. It's not necessarily that you're experiencing abuse, although some may be. What's happening is that we're taking away high points in people's lives that give them reward and meaning. That may have an effect over time. The initial response is not as difficult as something that's stressful, but over time, the anhedonia, the loss of pleasure, is going to drive you down a lot more, which I think is critical. And then I'm going to read 3 paragraphs from nearer the end, in which the author, let me just set it up first. The author is visiting the teacher, the favorite teacher of a young man named Cooper, who was apparently healthy and well-adjusted and beloved, and he was a star quarterback, and he committed suicide. And it was stunning to everyone. Like, people did not believe it when they heard his name, and he was not the first. And just a little bit by way of setup, that New Mexico has been in sort of extreme lockdown for almost a year at this point, and has shut down schools and most school sports and all of this, whereas just over the border here where this is happening in Texas, the government has mostly let local jurisdictions decide as they want to. And so let's see, here we go, these 3 paragraphs. My last visit in Hobbs, that's the town in New Mexico, was to the home of Jennifer Espinoza, Cooper's favorite teacher. When I entered her bungalow, Espinoza, a friendly woman in her 40s, said that I should feel welcome to take my mask off, because she had already been through a serious case of COVID-19 several weeks earlier. This startled me, but not nearly as much as what she told me next. That soon after her own illness, her partner of 18 years, Abe, had died of what had strongly resembled COVID-19, though his initial test had come back negative. He had been away from Hobbs at the time, working an oil field job in Odessa, Texas, and a coworker he had shared a truck with later tested positive. Abe died on November 30th at the age of 49, before she could see him. And then Cooper, the quarterback, had died a week later. It had been a terrible month, and it had left her uncertain about the best course for the Hobbs schools and sports teams. As the school year started, she had been among the majority of teachers who were willing to return to classrooms. This had not only been confirmed for her as she saw how poorly the remote learning was going. Not only did most students leave their cameras off, some wouldn't even turn on their microphones. I can't see them. I can't even hear them, she said. They didn't want to talk. But then she herself had gotten the virus. She wasn't sure where, and its severity had hit home, even before her partner's death. She had swung the other way on reopening. Now Cooper's death was making her reconsider again. If it would prevent another Cooper, then definitely yes, she said. We just have to weigh the good and the bad. Do we fear everyone coming back and possibly getting COVID, or do we fear losing another student more? You had not heard that before.
No. It makes me think a lot of things, and it's hard for me to separate it from what the world looks like as people are experimenting with, returning to it as spring is dawning here in Portland. And this has always been a trade-off, and frankly, we have dealt with it very, very badly. We have dealt in black and white terms across the board, right? And this, you have, for example, a continuum in vulnerability by age.
Yeah.
Right? That ought to be having a dramatic effect on the way we think about things such as school. It ought to be having a dramatic effect on the way we evaluate the costs and benefits of a novel vaccine. And yet we are not in this mindset. It's like you're either on board with the vaccine or you're not, or you're you're casual about the virus and you want schools to open in spite of the hazard, or you're paranoid.
Yeah.
Right. And it's never been this way.
You're either in favor of avoiding the virus or in avoiding economic disaster. You can't be interested in both. It's not allowed by the conversation.
It's not allowed by the conversation. And any of us who are trying to do this carefully know that it is the conversation. It has always been the conversation. And to the extent that the conversation is ruled out in favor of a choice between two things that can't possibly be right, we are setting ourselves up for a disaster. And I will say, we have been pointing to this from the beginning. We've been right about a lot, but I think this is the thing that we are most right about and have been most consistent in trying to alert people to the danger, is that they are blocking themselves off from normal human interactions, and that is only going to accelerate the process of us going insane. And that you as an individual have a certain amount you can do, right? A lot you can do, but it involves figuring out how to reduce the harm of the trade-off itself, right? So for example, yesterday I saw a group of young people gathered in a way that young people do not typically gather. They had clearly all ridden their bikes somewhere, which was nice enough to see.
Young, how old?
Late teenagers.
Okay.
They had ridden their bikes somewhere, and they were decidedly sitting in a circle in which they were socially distant, and they were being teenagers together.
Mixed sex?
What?
Mixed sex?
They were, I would say it was 2/3 boys, but it was mixed.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, the point is there's a way, and it's out there, and all you need to do is be tuned into a finer level of detail about what this threat is and how it works and how it doesn't work. And the point is, okay, hey, there's a loophole, right? How do we use that loophole?
There's a way for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, again, almost after many months of ever colder, wetter, worse weather, right? So, we happen to be having a couple of just glorious days here in Portland, and it's, it feels now for those of us just in the Pacific Northwest, like the weather has turned, not such that we're about to hit those, 2.5 months of glorious, perfect weather that everyone else wishes they had, which won't come until maybe mid-July, but that we are now hitting that intermittent phase where it's not just going to be, really wet and cold with occasionally a sunbreak, but we're going to increasingly get more and more days, like the ratio of beautiful days as it gets warmer and warmer and warmer and bluer and bluer and bluer, to days that you wouldn't really be sitting socially distanced outside is going to go up.
Well, but still, the loophole isn't, it's great, go use it. The loophole is make dopamine while the sun shines. And
I like that.
we were warning people before winter. Winter is coming. And yes, that's a joke, but it's also not a joke. And I think the thing is, what you want, it's like you have an account, and the account is drained as you are isolated from the things that actually calibrate you and matter. And that is filled up every time you are able to go participate in those things. And the fact, we didn't know if the failure of COVID to transmit outdoors would endure. We still don't know, but so far it seems to have.
So far it's enduring.
So as long as it endures, the point is, how weird that 98% of the space in your city, 98% of the space is probably safe, right? And you're not thinking of it that way. And in fact, I'm stuck when I go out and I use our Rails to Trails bike path, and I see therefore lots and lots of people. Something like half of them are wearing masks, whether they're biking or walking or whatever they're doing. And I don't know for sure. Some of them, if two people are walking side by side and they don't live together, then maybe they're doing it because it's probably more caution than I think is necessary given the evidence about outdoors, but there's a defense of it. On the other hand, if you're riding along and you're not riding with anybody, then the point is, well, you're not making as much vitamin D as you'd be making, right? You need more sun exposure. You need a break from the sense that everything is about COVID at all moments. And the fact of something touching your face can't be mentally healthy.
I will. So we've talked about this before, and it was last summer, the last time that we were biking together, but you've been on your bike a lot. And I think the four of us, you, me, and our boys, were out on a different trail system, coming back from sort of deep southeast Portland at one point, and we also saw a lot of people on bikes with masks, and we're wondering what that's about. And I think there's effectively no chance that if you are biking alone, you can get COVID.
Yep.
If you're not masked. And so the wearing masks on bikes is, I agree with you that it is going to be, unnecessary, but that if you are biking hard, if you are breathing hard and you pass someone close, it is more likely than if you weren't breathing hard that you could transmit to that person.
It's one factor out of many, and I would love to know whether anybody at all has actually contracted COVID from such a scenario, right? And if some have, it's a tiny fraction, and how much better off how much more bike riding would get done, and therefore how much more sanity would be retained if people weren't feeling like they had to do it in active COVID prevention mode.
Yes.
But anyway, the question that I have, so I have this sense, I look at these people and I have this urge, because of the kind of person I am and have been all along, I have this urge, I want to talk to each of them and I want to say, do you know that you probably don't need to be doing that, right? And of course that would be a disaster many, many times, and sometimes it would get a proper response. But the problem is, I think we're involved in a story out there. Right.
Oh,
and the story is the good people and the bad people, and you can recognize them by their masks. And therefore, the point is, you wouldn't want to take advantage of the fact that you don't need the mask under many outdoor circumstances, because then you would signal you're part of the bad people, and nothing's worse than that. And so what I'm hoping is that somehow those of us who get this, and those of us who get how much harm there is from masks when you don't need them, how much advantage there is in feeling normal about anything at all during COVID, right? Given all of that, what we need is some sort of signal that I'm not wearing my mask now, but it isn't because I don't take that as very, very important, right? I want something, I feel like I should be wearing something that says I'm a COVID hawk, but I'm not wearing my mask because it's not needed here, right? And of course, that's too much. But somehow we need to create that culture of people who do get the danger, take it very seriously, and maybe that's even why they're out on a given day, that because you need the normalcy in order to retain your sanity in such crazy times.
Indeed. Well, lots more to say about the tensions, and to have the words, the story of this teacher whose partner died of COVID and whose cherished student died of suicide within a week of one another, due to the political measures put in place to prevent COVID, is remarkable. And maybe we'll just let that sit.